Good morning. How are you doing?
Hey, John. Good to see you.
It is good to be here. It is good to be here for everybody that is joining us live. Thanks for joining us this morning. If you are here, would love to kind of start the conversation with Gerwai here as we talk through a little bit of AI and the development life cycle. It's a big theme we've been hearing a lot. I've been talking to a lot of managed service providers who are building and shipping their own features. But you've been in the industry for, how long have you been building software?
Wow, that's a good question. Since 1998.
So you've seen it all.
Y2K.
Yeah, you got me beat by quite a bit. I've got maybe 15 years of building, but not that many years of building. But obviously, it's a wild time in the era of building. And so I want to talk about how we do it right and also what we're seeing change in the industry as a result of it. So before we get started, jump on the conversations, say hi, ask questions. It's an open discussion. Your questions will beat my questions. I guarantee it. And so we'll jump in here very briefly. Before we go in, we're going to talk today through the vendor responsibility in the AI era, the high tax, who pays it on the other side of AI, and a healthier AI ready channel. And it's going to be a really fun discussion, but maybe do an introduction for everybody that's listening that doesn't know you. And I don't want the elevator pitch, the 3 or 4 minute story. I want to get to know you this morning.
All right, cool. I appreciate it, John. Well, I'm Gerwai. I've been in the industry since 2008. It's when I got hired at ConnectWise and worked with Arnie and David Bellini. In fact, quite frankly, a funny story there. When I started, I was tasked with running the sales org, right? So VP of sales and running an inherited team. But Arnie would show up at my desk pretty much every morning for about the first month. And the thing that he was doing when he'd show up is teaching me ConnectWise, like how to use the app, how we do business in this app, how we run our own business in it, and how we, create best practices for MSPs. And it's all like straight from his head to my head, and I had to learn it. So I've had a really a great opportunity to learn from a person that has developed many of the best practices that this industry follows. So it's been really an interesting ride. But as I mentioned before that, I started in software back in '98. So I wasn't building at that time, John. So just to be clear, I wasn't building anything. I was the guy just hoping to survive in a new business. It was banking software at the time. And my job was to do implementations, to help people go from one banking system to another. And that required data mapping. My first time using SQL. Fox Pro was around at the time too. We were using that technology to query data. And it was heady stuff for me because I had come out of school, like my college background was just business. It wasn't anything to do with banking. And I got a job in banking after that. And then banking software people wanted my experience and brought me over. So that was how I got connected with software. And the moment I got into software, I was like, whoa, this is something special. This is a place where every day you can be creative. You can come in and build what you want effectively from thin air. And I felt like that's just a really interesting place to be. It's, as you mentioned to me in the past, that visionary in you, it really allows you to be so creative in ways that you can never imagine. So, for those of you vibe coding, welcome. The water's warm. It's exciting. It's fun. It's creative. And new possibilities are afoot right now.
It is really interesting, as I've been talking to people, just getting back from Salt Lake City very late last night and being out there at PAX 8 Beyond all week. This is a trend, Gerwai, that I know we've been on the road many years in our life. I don't think in my life I've ever been on the road where MSPs have come up to me and said, oh, we're building this internally. We're building that internally. We're building this internally. The build era is definitely here. Yeah. Where managed service providers have decided that, have seen the opportunity and the value in building of themselves. And so today I just kind of want to dig into that, right? Like, what we're seeing from our side as software business, owners, and how we can maybe help guide and navigate a little bit of some of our learning over the years. So the reason I wanted to talk about this with you is I remember sitting out at GTIAs, communities, councils, and forums. And we were talking about best practices in software at the time. And you said something to me that stuck since then, which is the value that you placed on the software that you build, and your high prioritization of bugs and features for your customers. And I just maybe want to start there and get to know the way that you think about building software before we really get into the meat in the topic today.
Yeah, sure. I think unfortunately teams can get behind, is what I'd call it. And I think priorities can get really challenging really quick. So let me give you the example. When things are really competitive and we're having to ship a lot of new product as software teams, what begins to happen is tech debt starts to build up. So all the things that we need to do to keep the architecture sound, to keep the application snappy, to have high quality of product shipped out, those things kind of get left on the shelf because, as you can imagine, it's like, well, maybe we can just have our customers suffer through for a little while longer before that has to be fixed, right? That's the tension we have in software companies. And so what we find oftentimes happens is that there's a prioritization that goes towards new development. So imagine like new additions to the house versus the existing house that we built and the bugs that are in the walls.
Yeah.
And I think that, unfortunately, I think that's the wrong decision. I think it happens a lot of places. I understand the reason why it happens. But I think that, the reality is, especially in SaaS software, where customers have the right to do other things, especially they've got more options now than ever, right? They can go vibe code a solution. If your product is low quality in this environment, I think it's a death knell. I just think that you have to always think about quality first. And if you're thinking about building additions to the house and you're actively working on an addition to the house and you see bugs show up in the main house, you've got to stop the work on the addition. You've got to go back to the main house and fix it. You got to clean it up. You got to make sure the doors are closed and windows are tight and there's nothing running around in those things. And so, as an example, when a bug arises for a software development team, sometimes it'll be months before it's fixed, right? Yeah. And you know it, and what we've oftentimes done in those cases. I've been a product manager. I've run a development team now, founder and CEO of TimeZest. You have these choices you make. You go, oh, can I give the customer workaround? Wouldn't that be amazing? What is a workaround to this thing? What if I can just say, okay, that used to take 2 steps to do, right? You used to be able to click a button and get it done. But now I can give you 5 steps to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And you can work around this bug that we've got in the system. And then hopefully you can just survive that way for a year or so, right?
Yeah.
Until we get to it, right? And I think those issues begin to build up over time, and it creates a feeling in your customers and a belief around the quality of your product. And I think that, in my case, in our team's case, it's culturally part of us. There's no one on the team that enjoys having bugs. And we just have focused on, we'll drop everything and we'll work the bugs out. So if there's a known bug in our application, the odds that it's there 48 hours later is likely like maybe 25% of the time. The odds that it's there a week later is about 0.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that culture. And I wrote down something over here that I don't think I've had this the thought towards it, but I'm almost going to say quality in this era is a moat. Because we could build things, but you and I both have gotten into what the new agentic development life cycles can look like. You can build fast and you can ship fast, but it's awfully buggy on the back end if you don't know what you're doing and the way that you're navigating and building your harness. And so I think quality is a moat in our new era. I want to talk about that. You said tech debt earlier too. We talked about that, and that comes in when you're building large software. Eventually, you accept it, and we talked about vibe coding, kind of sometimes creating that tech debt unknown, and sometimes quality suffers. I want to get your thoughts here. Like in an era where people are building fast and vendors are just new vendors are popping up left and right. How does an MSP spot a vendor who's building something like you, who has quality, who has like expectations of running software bug free versus of somebody who decided they were going to vibes code something overnight? And should they care, or what does it mean to them when they're spotting vendors and talking to them now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should care. I mean, because the experience is something that their team is going to either suffer through or their end customers are going to suffer through, which is even worse, right? Imagine a bad experience with an end customer. Imagine it being a VIP, like an owner, as an example, at one of those
Mhm.
accounts. And what does that create? I think it creates churn. I think it creates, a customer that's searching for another provider at the end of the day. And so the easiest way to solve it is if a company isn't providing trials of their technology these days, I think it's kind of dead in the water for me, at least. I mean, there has to be a method in which you can check out applications before making a full commitment to them. That's just the reality of what modern SaaS is all about. And I think that if people aren't taking that principle and holding it high, there's something wrong.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think in today's experience, we definitely have to be able to try things because they just move so quickly. Do you have any thoughts on how an MSP could sift through the waters to suss out, a business that's building strong foundational software versus maybe a business that's kind of vibe coding? Do you ask that question? Is there a way you can tell from the product itself? What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, number one, let me throw something out there, and you tell me what you
Yeah.
think about this. As much as people are like, "Oh, I'm going to vibe code something, and I'm going to, catch up to this other team that's been working on this," like a SaaS company like us, like you, we're all vibe coding, man.
Yeah.
we're just doing it at a rate that it will be really hard to keep up with because our team are professional programmers, right?
Yeah.
Developers, engineers. This is what they grew up doing, what they went to school for. So as much as someone that's been able to grab some AI technology, let's call it Claude Code, and
Yeah.
go start to build something, that's great. Do that. But I think the key is you've got to do it in areas where it's not mission critical. You
Hmm.
really got to think about like how are you going to replicate the software development lifecycle that teams like mine and teams like yours have had to build. It's really important to think about the steps that go into design, the steps that go into code, and the steps that go into quality assurance. What's
Yep.
required for all of that? Like the teams you need to build, the people you need to have on staff to be able to do those things. And so I think that if it's a low criticality product, okay, imagine it's a product or a solution where people log into it, once a week,
Yep.
and a fraction of the team has to log into it on that weekly basis.
Yep.
Well, that probably has some potentially, never
Yep.
know for sure, right? Has some low criticality. I mean,
Yep.
obviously, DNS server, you don't log into it
Pretty
all the time. It
important.
has high criticality, right? So, but generally, that indicates, it's not quite mission critical. They're not having to be in that application every day. And in those cases, I think those are great opportunities to try to tackle finding a solution you can maybe build in-house yourself, and then figure out how you're going to backstop that, right? If you have generally what's happening is one teammate that's producing this kind of a product opportunity and vibe coding a solution to replace another
Yep.
SaaS solution that you've bought effectively.
Hmm.
What's the plan if they win the lottery? What's the plan if they get stuck right in a dark hallway and can't go any further and are lost? What happens when they can't go any further and solve a problem? What happens when the application goes down and no one knows how to get it running again? Like, those are, I think, the reasons why this stuff can be a little bit dangerous in what you select to go chase down. And so I would start with criticality. How
Yep.
mission critical is this application that we're talking about kind of doing ourselves, rolling ourselves, and then go from there. I think there's no reason people shouldn't be trying to do stuff
Yeah.
here. But I think they have to understand the guardrails that we need to place to make this viable for a business.
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously we are all doing agentic code. I think there's a difference between agentic coding and vibe coding. I think
Sure.
we're probably agentic coding. I don't
Yeah,
think we're throwing it to the vibes.
that's
Uh,
true.
yeah, but I like the term. I still get it. Uh,
We're all vibe coding, man.
yeah,
That's
we're all
all. That's all I
fair,
want to make people aware
fair enough. Fair enough. But in that case, what does irresponsible vibe coding look like, or what does irresponsible AI production look like in a vendor? Like, is it inbounds today to start asking those questions around architecture and scale and things like that in the conversation to make sure they're adequate to answer them? Or that's where I get challenged, right? Because everything can look good and everything can look clean nowadays. It's pretty easy to put a really strong, polished up piece of software from the ground up. But it's hard to kind of sniff out what's under the hood without asking the questions, I would say.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Well, what's your experience been with that? You've probably run into this a few times with people in the industry. And I think part of this is a life cycle process too, right?
Yeah.
So when new possibilities arise, it's like, whoa, let's go chase that down. It's great. Okay, we're all chasing this thing down. We're all trying to think about ways in which we can, knock down some cost in the business. And I do think that what begins to happen is the awareness of where the challenges lie, the potholes in the road effectively show up as you go down the road, right? Has that been your experience with others you've chatted with? And like, have you had someone say, wow, I got stuck here.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten that phone call at least half a dozen times where we went down the AI vibe code road path, and now we're running into these things where it's slowing down and we can't scale it and we can't take it to the next level, or we try to add a feature and it breaks another feature over here. We're at the point where, in my mind, there's this this bloat that occurs within AI where it's basically context bloat, where you the Claude code can't contextually handle the amount of code that is being written. Modern speculative development practices have started to resolve a bit of that, but context bloat is real if you're not planning for it. And so you get stuck and you can't move forward. So yeah, I mean, I've heard those calls. I've had those calls. I've talked to them, and unfortunately, it's like there's nothing you could do unless you want to hire a true professional software engineer to go detangle what mess might be down there. And so, yeah, you asked the question, have we heard it? Yeah, we've had that question. I'm happy to always answer. I think it's within bounds to talk about the team that's building it and how they're building it, and set the expectation of what they're doing. Just like it's kind of in bounds to a certain degree as you grow and build a business to say you have to be some level of SOC 2 compliance. You should have some level of assurance that you can share back to your customers on how you are building. To kind of give them a little confidence. So,
yeah, and I think that highlights, if you're doing that with a low criticality application, well, then the harm isn't as great if you get stuck, right?
Yeah,
and I think some percentage of people will get through, right? Some percentage of solutions can be developed this way.
Yeah,
but I think to your point, it's kind of hard to assess it at the beginning, meaning, when are you going to hit the context window problems? Are the AI labs going to get us to a place where those context windows grow fast enough in front of us to where we don't ever hit that wall? Kind of the frontier is expanding in front of us, and we don't have that problem. But to your point, I think you're right. There's a lot that goes into making sure that you can keep going, and it isn't just the quality of the product and the team, but it's also the platforms that we're writing this code in.
Yeah, I'd be curious. You've been building TimeZest TimeZest has been around what, 5? I want to say more than 5
years.
Okay, I was pretty close. Yeah. I remember kind of the first time seeing that logo, and it was very similar to an era of mine. What's changed in the way that you think about building software in the last couple of years specifically?
Well, we've definitely had to be on the forefront of ensuring that we're highly productive. And to be highly productive, the first step was ensuring we were using technology like Claude Code to make sure that our teams aren't just dealing with laboriously typing every single line of code, right? Yeah. As you can imagine. But I think what begins to happen is if you harness or you give that power to an engineer, a software engineer, it makes them superhuman, right? In so many ways, because they can now just produce so much more. In fact, what it has done for us, I'm curious if this happened to you too, it's created new bottlenecks in the business. And so as you've highlighted around quality, the number one bottleneck we have right now is not identifying what needs to be built, not building the UI for what needs to be built, not writing the code for what needs to be built. It's QAing what gets built.
Yeah.
That is our number one bottom. Code check a little bit too, right? Code review. So for those that don't know, when you have a team of programmers working on a problem, you want this peer review process to happen. Even if the code has been written by an application like Claude Code, you need humans to get in there and say, well, was that logically written? Was it written in its best form or fashion? Could we refactor this area to improve its efficiency? Like, there's a lot that goes into figuring out how to keep an application snappy and really, really ideal. And as you can imagine, we all have this. We'll query or we'll prompt an AI engine to do something, right? Mm-hmm. And before you know it, you go, that's just wrong. Yeah. I know that's not the most efficient way through that problem, and I know the best practice way to get through this. Well, that's the same thing that happens in engineering. We can look at the code that's been produced by Claude and say, whoa, that is not what is ideal. We know it's not ideal. We can test it to ensure that it's not ideal. We can, benchmark performance through that code base to know that it's not ideal. So there's a lot that we can do to understand what's best, but it requires peer review. It requires two peers. It also requires the right kind of peers. So for example, if we take our code too personal, even if it was written by Claude, which I think, is kind of getting a little less personally attached to code these days. It used to be someone's identity. Now it's not so much someone's identity as much, but it still is to a degree, because however you guided or prompted, Claude in this case, to shape the code, and however you went in and then with your own mind refactored it and made it optimized, it's still a very personal experience. And so for those developers, what happens is it's hard to be humble in that situation. So imagine if John and I are in a code review session. He's a peer to me or my boss potentially. And he's going, well, Gerwai, you should refactor this area. I would do it this way. I'd create a library for this or whatnot. And it's not the most efficient way. And our standards would say we should do it this other way. Yep. And, sometimes that becomes a tense conversation. So you have to have the right people. You have to have the low ego people in the room in these cases saying, John, you're right. Your idea is better than mine. I'm going to go do what you just said. I agree with you, right? The logic needs to win at the end of the day. And that's not always an easy process. So that's one step of the process. But when we get down to the QA part, so that's code check, and code check is not always, it can create a bottleneck in itself because you're producing so much code, and now it's got to be integrated and can't step on code. One patch can't step on another. And so before you know it, that's a bottleneck point. But then QA for us is really, we think we've solved that part of it. But when it gets to QA, that's where it gets really difficult, because sometimes when you're shipping, you're really scaling up a lot of features, and you've got to go have a lot of potentially humans touch that code to make sure that it's operating the right way. AI still isn't at a point in which you can just say, go QA all this code that we wrote, right? Of
course. Yeah. I think you flagged some really key things there. I think, the second order and third order impact items that are coming out of AI, right? Like, you can produce code rapidly, but you now have more to do quality assurance and, really limiting the slop as well. I'm not saying that's what your team's been doing by any means, but in a good peer review process, you are. Yeah. You said that, we're here at the 25 minute mark. I want to start moving into a wrap up, but I have one key question for you that I wanted to hit. If you could set an AI standard or two that every vendor would have to meet as they're building software, what would you set that every vendor must do? Wow, that's a good one. All right, well, let me start with human in the loop. Yeah. I think it's been on my mind for our chat here. You think about these decisions that MSPs are needing to make around what application they go tackle to maybe code themselves, to build themselves. And I would use, as I mentioned earlier, quality and mission critical. The third thing I'd use is, really, really focus on keeping the human in the loop. Because if we can imagine, right, we start putting this in front of customers, AI is going to hallucinate. There's no question about it. It's going to ask questions or have a conversation, a chatbot engagement potentially, or whatever the case may be, whatever you do to allow a customer to directly engage it. It can have quality issues, and it's not a thing that many of us can completely eliminate. It's coming from the LLM. It's not from us. Oftentimes it's almost a pass-through experience that's happening in that case. And so
I think we've got to be really careful. I mean, it's a lot like a Tesla. Like today, there has to be someone grabbing the wheel if things go haywire. And for now, we have a steering wheel in every one of those cars. In the future, maybe we'll be at a point where you can remove the human from the loop, or maybe there's an area or a particular application where removing the human from the loop is okay. But as we can see right now, at least what I see in the foreseeable future, we've got to be very cautious about it. I'm not saying don't do it. I know I won't. I'm not prepared to do it myself, and we're a professional software development house, right, and team. But if you do it, you definitely have to do it in a very low critical way, just like we were talking about with the criticality of the application itself. So I'd highly suggest keep it as a solution that maybe your team leverages that has, a little bit of a barrier between you and the end customer. That's my belief.
Yeah, wonderful advice. I'm a very firm believer in human in the loop. Got into a little bit of a heated debate on LinkedIn the other day where somebody said, no, we don't need it. That's the opposite of what we need. And I'm like, okay, well, we can agree to disagree on that one.
Think about this. Like, what did the MSP business end user, right? What did their end user sign up for?
Yeah.
Okay. Their end user didn't sign up for this constant race to better profitability for the MSP and changing the business model of how they're delivering service. Yep. They signed up for and they had an expectation was set. So, I know we're always in a race to improve economics. We're always in a race to try to improve financials of an MSP. But I do think we've got to be careful about, well, what was the expectation that the customer has? And, there's pushback on AI. There's plenty of business owners that are going to start to say, well, I'm going to call the MSP that did it the old-fashioned way because I don't like this experience. I want humans helping me. I don't want to be in the middle of some chatbot experience to get my support. So I think we've got to just keep that in mind. We have to remember that they aren't guinea pigs.
I agree. I love it. We are now at the top of the half hour. I appreciate it. Those are fantastic parting notes. I want to always sign off my show with the opportunity. You gave everybody in the audience here some great pieces of advice. I've got a lot to write up from what we actually just talked about, but I offer everybody on the show for taking the time. Last 30 seconds here. Give us your shameless plug, Gerwai. Tell them why they should reach out to you and what they should reach out to you for.
Oh, wow. Well, we've been tackling the scheduling problem for a long time now, and we think we've got that pretty well locked down. So we are now shipping in beta a dispatch assistant solution, something that addresses triage, ticket dispatch, and scheduling all bundled into one application. So if you imagine, the dispatch job description, we're covering everything but the human communication part.
I love it. I'll have them reach out to you then on LinkedIn. They probably see you here on LinkedIn. I'll tag you on LinkedIn and they can reach out to you directly. Thank you so much for joining us here on a Thursday morning. 30 minutes evaporates as we saw here. I had a lot of questions, but it was a great conversation. I think a lot of good advice for everybody on the show. So thank you for joining me this morning. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you, man.
Bye.